The rain came through the ceiling in 3 places now, and Darren Ashford stood in his kitchen at midnight with 2 buckets and a cooking pot arranged in a triangle, listening to the orrhythmic percussion of water hitting metal. Beyond the failing walls of his inherited farmhouse, he knew the eastern fence had finally collapsed under its own rot, which meant by morning his dozen sheep would likely be scattered across the valley or worse, in old man Garrett's wheat field, and that would mean another debt he could not pay. He was 26 years old, his father 6 months dead, and everything the old man had built was coming apart faster than Darren could hold it together. He had no money for a carpenter. He had no money for fence posts. He had barely enough coin left to see himself through winter, and that assumed he could get the sheep to market before they wandered off to become someone else's problem. The farmhouse sat 3 miles from the nearest village, tucked into a fold of hill country where the human settlements ended and the wild frontier began. His father had chosen this isolation deliberately, wanting distance from neighbors and their judgments, their questions about why a man would work himself to death on thin soil for poor yields. Darren understood now what he had not understood as a boy. His father had been running from something, and the farm had been less a home than a prison of his own making. The rain drummed harder. Darren picked up his lantern and went to check the bedroom, where a 4th leak had opened up above his bed, soaking the quilts his mother had sewn before the fever took her. He dragged the sodden bedding onto the floor and stood there feeling the weight of futility settle over him like the damp itself. He was still standing there when he heard the crash. It came from outside, from the direction of the barn, a splintering sound followed by something heavy hitting the ground. Darren grabbed his father's old sword from where it hung by the door, more rust than steel but still capable of giving someone a bad day, and pushed out into the rain. The barn door was open, swinging in the wind. He had latched it, he was certain he had latched it, but the wood was old and the latch was older. Inside, the darkness was nearly complete, his lantern casting wild shadows across the stalls where his plow horse stamped nervously. The sheep were huddled in their pen, but something was wrong with the back wall, with the tool storage area his father had built into the corner. Someone was there. Darren raised the sword, his heart hammering. "Come out, I can see you." He could not actually see anything, but it seemed like the thing to say. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain on the roof, which was in better condition than the house roof, at least. Then a shape moved in the darkness, unfolding itself from behind a stack of wood planks, and Darren's breath caught. She was tall, taller than him by several inches, with broad shoulders and arms corded with muscle visible even in the poor light. Her skin was green, a deep forest green that seemed to absorb the lamplight, and when she turned her face toward him, he saw the small tusks jutting from her lower lip, the pointed ears, the golden eyes that watched him with an animal wariness. She was young, he thought, maybe younger than him, and she was soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her skull, her clothes little more than rags hanging from her powerful frame. She was also bleeding. A gash ran along her left arm from shoulder to elbow, deep enough that the blood had soaked through what remained of her shirt. "I mean no harm," she said, and her voice was surprisingly soft, surprisingly clear despite the tusks. "I will leave. I only sought shelter from the rain." Darren should have let her go. Orcs were dangerous. Everyone knew that. They raided human settlements, they killed travelers on the road, they were monsters wearing human shape. The fact that she was female changed nothing. Female orcs were just as deadly as the males, maybe more so because they were faster, more cunning. But she was bleeding, and she was alone, and something in the way she held herself, in the careful distance she maintained, in the way her eyes kept flicking to the barn door like she expected pursuit, made him think of a wounded animal more than a monster. "That cut needs tending," he heard himself say. She looked at him like he had spoken in a foreign language. "What? Your arm? It needs cleaning and bandaging or it will go bad." Darren lowered the sword slightly, though he did not drop it. "I have supplies in the house. You would help me." The suspicion in her voice was so thick he could almost taste it. "I would prefer not to have you die in my barn," Darren said, which was not quite an answer but felt safer than admitting he did not know why he was doing this. "If you are going to bleed to death, do it somewhere else. If you are not, let me patch you up and you can be on your way." She studied him for a long moment, those golden eyes searching his face for deception. Finally, slowly, she nodded. "Very well." He led her to the house through the rain, acutely aware of her presence behind him, of the fact that she could probably snap his neck before he got the sword halfway up. The kitchen seemed smaller with her in it, her head nearly brushing the low ceiling beams. He pointed to one of the chairs and she sat, moving with surprising grace for someone so large. Darren set the sword within reach, but not in hand, then fetched his father's medical kit from the cupboard. It was not much, just some clean cloth, a bottle of alcohol for disinfecting, needle and thread for stitching. His father had taught him basic field medicine the way he had taught him everything else, with grim practicality and no patience for squeamishness. "This will hurt," Darren said, pouring alcohol onto a cloth. "Pain is familiar," she replied, and there was a story in those words that he did not ask about. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could manage, which was not very gently given that it was caked with mud and what looked like tree bark. She sat perfectly still, not even a hiss of breath escaping her, though he could see the tension in her jaw, the way her good hand gripped the edge of the chair hard enough to make the wood creak. Up close, he could see other scars, old ones, crisscrossing her arms and disappearing under her tattered clothing. Whatever kind of life she had led, it had been a hard one. The cut was clean, at least not ragged. Something sharp had made it, a blade maybe. When he started stitching, she finally made a sound, a low grunt that might have been pain or just acknowledgement. "What is your name?" Darren asked, partly to distract her and partly because it seemed wrong to be doing this to someone without even knowing what to call them. She hesitated. "Thraza." "I am Darren Ashford. This is my farm, such as it is." "Such as it is," she repeated, and he thought there might have been a hint of dark amusement in her voice. Her eyes went to the buckets catching rain, to the water-stained walls, to the general air of disrepair that hung over everything like a shroud. "You are alone here. My father died 6 months ago. It has been just me since then. I am sorry." The words surprised him enough that he looked up from his stitching. Orcs did not apologize. Everyone said so. They did not feel sympathy or sadness or any of the gentler emotions. They were creatures of rage and hunger and violence. But her eyes were sad, he thought, or maybe he was just seeing what he wanted to see. He finished the stitching and wrapped her arm in clean cloth, tying it off securely. "There. Keep it dry if you can and change the bandage every day. If it starts to smell bad or the skin around it gets hot and red, you have an infection and you need to clean it again with alcohol." "I know how to treat wounds," Thraza said quietly, "but I thank you for this. I have no coin to pay you." "I did not ask for coin." Darren stood and went to the pot he kept on the stove, where a thin vegetable stew had been simmering. It was not much, mostly water and turnips and some dried beans, but it was food. He ladled some into a bowl and set it in front of her along with a spoon. She stared at it like it might bite her. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you are hungry and I have food. I am an orc. I noticed. Humans do not help orcs. They kill us or drive us away. Darren sat down across from her, suddenly exhausted. I am too tired to kill anyone, and the rain is too heavy for driving. Eat the soup or do not. It is your choice. But if you eat it, you are welcome to sleep in the barn until the storm passes. The hayloft is dry. She picked up the spoon with her uninjured hand, still watching him like he might suddenly lunge at her with a knife. The first spoonful went down slowly, cautiously. Then the second went faster. By the third, she was eating with the desperate focus of someone who had not seen food in days. Darren ate his own portion in silence, listening to the rain hammer at his failing roof, trying not to think about the fence or the sheep or any of the 100 other problems that would still be waiting when morning came. Across from him, an orc woman ate vegetable soup in his kitchen, and somehow that felt like the least strange thing about this entire terrible day. When she finished, she set the bowl down carefully, almost reverently. I am in your debt, Darren Ashford. You are not. It was just soup. It was kindness. That is rarer than gold in my experience. She stood, and again he was struck by how tall she was, how she had to duck slightly under the doorframe. I will sleep in your barn tonight if the offer still stands. In the morning I will be gone. Where will you go? She smiled, and it was a bitter thing. Somewhere else. Anywhere else. It does not matter much. He should have let her go. Should have nodded and said good night and locked his door and congratulated himself on his charity. But something in her voice, in that casual acceptance of having nowhere to go and no one to turn to, caught at him. The fence is down, he said. The eastern fence, and there are leaks in the roof. I cannot afford to hire help, but if you were willing to work for food and shelter for a few days, I could use the hands. She went very still. You would trust me here, working beside you. I am trusting you enough to sleep in my barn. If you wanted to murder me and steal everything I own, you could do it tonight just as easily as you could tomorrow. He met her eyes, those strange golden eyes. I need help. You need a place to stay. It does not have to be more complicated than that. Everything is more complicated than that, Thraza said, but he heard the waver in her voice, the want beneath the wariness. If anyone saw me here, if anyone knew you harbored an orc, they would burn your farm and call it justice. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away, and he is half blind besides. No one comes out here except the tax collector, and he is not due until spring. She was silent for a long time, and he could see the war playing out across her face, need battling with caution. Finally, slowly, she nodded. 3 days. I will stay 3 days, help you with what needs doing. Then I leave and you forget you ever saw me. Agreed. They shook on it, her hand engulfing his, her grip careful despite the obvious strength in it. Her skin was warm, warmer than he expected, and rough with calluses. That night, Darren lay in the wet spot where his bed used to be, listening to the rain finally begin to ease, and wondered what he had just invited into his life. Morning came gray and damp, the world wrapped in mist that turned the hills into ghost shapes. Darren woke stiff and cold, his clothes still damp from last night's adventure, and made his way to the kitchen to start a fire and put coffee on to boil. Through the window, he could see the barn door was closed, and he wondered if Thraza was still there or if she had slipped away in the night despite her promise. Then the door opened and she stepped out, and in the morning light she looked even more out of place, a figure from the wild frontier stories his father used to tell, except real and solid, and currently surveying his ruined fence line with her hands on her hips. Darren pulled on his boots and coat and went out to meet her. She turned at his approach, and he saw that she had cleaned up somewhat, though her clothes were still more rag than garment. The fence is worse than I thought, she said without preamble. Half the posts are rotted through. We will need to replace at least a dozen, maybe more. And the wire is rusted in places. It will not hold even if we get the posts up. I know. Darren rubbed his face, feeling the stubble rasp under his palm. I have some timber we can cut for posts, but the wire is going to be a problem. I cannot afford new wire until I sell the sheep, and I cannot sell the sheep until I get them to market, and I cannot get them to market if they all wander off. Then we start with what we have and make do with the rest. Thraza walked along the fence line, testing posts with quick shoves that made the whole structure shudder. We cut new posts today, set them tomorrow. The wire we can patch and reinforce. It will not be pretty, but it will hold. You know fence work. She gave him a look that was almost amused. I know how to build things, how to fix things. My clan, we moved often. Had to be able to make camp quickly, break it down quickly. Fences, shelters, all of it, I learned young. There was a past tense in her words that Darren did not press. Your clan. You are not with them now. No. The word was flat, final. I am not. They worked through the morning, Darren showing her where his father had stored timber, helping her select pieces that were straight enough and strong enough to serve as fence posts. She worked with an efficiency that spoke of long practice, marking lengths with a piece of charcoal, then setting to with an axe that made Darren's own attempts at woodcutting look like a child playing with sticks. The muscles in her arms and shoulders bunched and flexed with each swing, and she set a pace that had him breathing hard just to keep up with clearing away the branches she was cutting. By midday, they had a dozen posts cut and ready. Darren's hands were blistered despite his gloves, and his shoulders ached, but there was a strange satisfaction in seeing the work take shape, in having company after months of solitary struggle. They ate lunch on the porch, more of the vegetable stew reheated, along with some hard bread that Darren had been saving. Thraza ate like someone who had forgotten what regular meals felt like, quick and focused, but when she finished, she sat back and looked out over the valley with an expression he could not quite read. It is a good place, she said finally. Quiet, peaceful, falling apart, Darren countered. All places fall apart if no one tends them, but the bones are good. The land is good. She gestured at the hills, at the little stream that ran through the eastern edge of his property, at the barn and the house, and the scraggly garden plot his father had kept. My father would have called this a place worth fighting for. Would have. He is dead. 5 years now. She said it matter-of-factly, but he heard the old pain underneath. Raiders from the south, humans with steel armor and fire. They came for our territory, drove us out. Killed anyone who resisted. My father resisted. I am sorry, Darren said, and meant it. She shrugged, a rolling motion of those powerful shoulders. It is the way of things. Humans and orcs, we have been killing each other since before either of us was born. We'll probably keep killing each other long after we are gone. It does not have to be that way, doesn't it? She turned to look at him, and there was challenge in her eyes. You fed me, you gave me shelter, you are letting me work beside you, but if your neighbors knew, what would they do? Would they nod and say how charitable you are? Or would they come with torches and ropes and call you a traitor to your kind? Darren wanted to argue, wanted to say she was wrong, but he could not, because she was right. The people in the village, they told stories about orcs the way his father had told him stories about demons and monsters. Things to be feared, to be destroyed. The fact that Thraza was sitting on his porch eating his food would be seen as a betrayal or worse, a perversion. Maybe they would, he admitted, but they are 3 miles away and you are here, so it does not matter what they would think. It matters, Thraza said quietly. It always matters, but I appreciate the thought. They spent the afternoon digging post holes, which was every bit as miserable as Darren remembered from helping his father years ago. The ground was soft from the rain, but full of rocks that had to be pried out and tossed aside. Thraza worked with a steady rhythm that made it look almost easy, driving the digging bar into the earth with her full weight, then scooping out the loosened soil with efficient motions. Darren struggled to keep pace, his hands cramping around the wooden handles, sweat running down his back despite the cool air. By evening, they had 6 holes dug and 2 posts set. Thraza showed him how to pack the earth back in around the base, tamping it down hard so the post would not shift. The work was exhausting, but there was something deeply satisfying about seeing the new posts standing straight and strong where the old ones had sagged. They washed up at the pump behind the house, the water shockingly cold, and Darren felt the ache in his muscles settling into a deep, bone-weary satisfaction. He had accomplished something today. With help, yes, but still, something real and tangible had been done. Dinner was the last of the stew and some eggs from his 3 chickens, scrambled over the fire and served with more of the hard bread. Thraza ate with the same focused intensity as before, but when she finished she leaned back in her chair and sighed, a sound of contentment that made her seem suddenly much younger. "I have not eaten this well in months," she said. "Not since I left the clan. Why did you leave?" The question was out before Darren could stop it, and he saw her face close down, the walls going back up. "It is a long story. We have time." She studied him for a long moment, then looked away, her gaze going to the fire in the stove. "I loved someone I should not have loved. Someone the clan elders said was forbidden, wrong. They told me to cast him aside or be cast out myself, so I left. Him?" Darren felt something twist in his chest, a feeling he did not want to examine too closely. "A human? No, another orc from a rival clan. We were supposed to be enemies, but we were young and foolish and thought love was enough to overcome blood feuds and old hatreds." Her voice was bitter now, edged with pain. "It was not. He went back to his people. I had no people to go back to. So I have been wandering ever since, doing odd jobs where I can find them, avoiding human settlements, avoiding orc settlements, avoiding everyone. That sounds lonely." "It is." She looked at him then, and the nakedness in her expression made his breath catch. "But loneliness is safer than the alternative. Safer than trusting someone and having them betray you. Safer than hoping for something better." Darren did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in silence as the fire burned down, and outside the night sounds of the farm settled in around them, the soft hoot of an owl, the rustle of wind in the trees, the distant bleating of a sheep that had probably wandered farther than it should. "I should check the flock," Darren said finally, standing. "Make sure they are all accounted for. I will come with you." They walked the property line with a lantern, counting sheep in the darkness, Thraza's sharp eyes catching glimpses of white wool that Darren would have missed. All 12 were present, though 3 had indeed made it through the gap in the fence, and were happily grazing in what would be his spring wheat field if he ever got around to planting it. They herded them back, Thraza moving with surprising gentleness for someone so large, her voice low and soothing as she guided the skittish animals. "You are good with them," Darren observed. "My clan kept herds, goats mostly, some cattle. I learned to handle animals before I learned to handle weapons." She paused, looking out over the dark valley. "I miss it sometimes, the simplicity of it. Wake up, tend the animals, mend the gear, sleep. No politics, no feuds, no complications. It was never that simple, though, was it?" "No," she admitted. "But it felt simple when I was young, before I learned how much hate there was in the world, how little room there was for anything else." They walked back to the house together, and at the door Thraza hesitated. "Thank you, Darren, for today, for all of this." "I know you did not have to. You are welcome." She nodded and turned toward the barn, and he watched her go, her tall form disappearing into the shadows. Then he went inside, barred the door out of habit more than fear, and lay down in his damp bed to sleep. The next day dawned clear and cold, the sky a hard blue that promised no more rain for a while at least. They finished setting the fence posts by noon, Thraza's strength making short work of the remaining holes. The wire was trickier, requiring careful splicing and reinforcement where it had rusted through. But by evening they had a fence that looked sturdy enough to hold curious sheep and possibly even deter a hungry wolf. Darren stood back, surveying their work, and felt something he had not felt in months: pride. It was not perfect, not by a long shot, but it was done, and it was his, and he had not done it alone. "One job finished," Thraza said, coming to stand beside him. "What is next?" "The roof." "But that is a bigger job, more complicated. We would need shingles, and I am not sure I can afford them right now." "What about thatch?" "Reeds from the stream bank, woven and layered. It would not be as good as shingles, but it would keep the rain out." Darren considered. His father had roofed the barn with thatch years ago, and it had held up reasonably well. It was labor-intensive, but labor was something they had. "We could try, but it would take more than a day. I have nowhere to be." He looked at her, this strange woman who had appeared in his barn like a ghost from a story, who worked like 3 men and asked for nothing but food and a dry place to sleep. "Your 3 days are up. You could leave if you wanted." "I could." She did not look at him, her eyes on the fence, on the valley beyond. "But if the offer still stands, I would stay longer, help you finish what needs doing. Then I will go." Relief flooded through him, stronger than he expected. "The offer stands." They spent the next 2 days cutting reeds from the stream bank and carrying them back in great bundles that left their hands raw and smelling of vegetation. Thraza showed him how to sort them by length and thickness, how to bind them into tight bunches that would shed water. The work was tedious but not difficult, and they fell into an easy rhythm, talking sometimes and sometimes working in comfortable silence. He learned things about her in those hours. That she had a sister somewhere in the Northern Territories. That she sang while she worked when she thought he was not listening. Low, wordless melodies that sounded like wind through stone. That she was terrified of spiders but would not admit it, jumping back with a strangled yelp whenever one scuttled out of the reeds, then glaring at him if he laughed. That she had never tasted honey until she was 15, and had eaten an entire comb in one sitting and been sick for 2 days. In return, he told her about his father, about the grim, silent man who had raised him with discipline and duty and very little affection. About his mother, who had died when he was 10, leaving a hole in the house that never quite filled in again. About his own failed dreams of leaving the farm, of seeing something of the world beyond these hills, dreams that had died with his father and left him chained to this place by obligation and inherited debt. "You could still leave," Thraza said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set in shades of orange and purple. "Sell the farm, take the money, go wherever you want. Who would buy a farm with a leaking roof and a patched fence in the middle of nowhere? Someone. There is always someone desperate enough or foolish enough." She glanced at him. "Is that the only reason you stay? Because you cannot sell?" He thought about it, really thought about it, trying to be honest with himself. "No, I stay because it is mine. Because my father left it to me, and walking away would feel like admitting he was wrong to trust me with it, like admitting I was not strong enough to do what he did. Your father worked himself to death trying to keep this place running. Is that what you want, to follow his example?" "I do not know what I want," Darren admitted, "except maybe to not feel like I am drowning anymore, to wake up one morning and not have the first thought in my head be about everything that is going wrong. That seems like a reasonable thing to want." They sat in silence for a while, and then Thraza said, very quietly, "I want that too. A place where I am not running, not hiding, where I can just be without fear. I have not felt that since I was a child." Darren wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but the words would not come. So instead he reached out and touched her hand, just briefly, just enough to let her know she was not alone in that wanting. She looked at him, and something passed between them, something fragile and new and terrifying. Then she pulled her hand back and stood, brushing off her trousers. "We should get the reeds under cover before the dew sets in. Do not want them getting damp." They worked until full dark, and when they finally stopped, Darren's back was screaming and his hands were so sore he could barely make a fist. But the reeds were bundled and stored in the barn, ready for the roofing work to begin. That night he lay in his bed, which was still damp but less so than it had been, and thought about Thraza in the barn. Thought about the way she moved, all coiled strength and unconscious grace. Thought about her laugh, rare but genuine when it came. Thought about the scars on her arms and the sadness in her eyes and the way she had looked at him when he touched her hand. He was in dangerous territory. He knew that. She was an orc. He was human. And the world had very strong opinions about what that meant. But lying there in the darkness, listening to the house settle around him, he could not quite bring himself to care. Morning came too soon, gray and chilly, autumn asserting itself now that the rain had passed. They started on the roof at first light, Darren climbing up with his father's old ladder while Thraza passed up bundles of reeds. The existing thatch was in terrible shape, rotted through in places, and they spent the first hour just clearing it away, exposing the rafters beneath. "It is a wonder the whole thing has not collapsed," Thraza said, looking at the gaps where rain and time had eaten through the wood. "My father patched what he could, but he was not young even then, and the roof is steep. I think he just gave up eventually. We will not give up." She climbed up beside him, moving with the confidence of someone who had never been afraid of heights. "Show me how you want it done." They worked through the day, layering the reeds in overlapping rows, binding them to the rafters with twine. It was painstaking work, requiring constant adjustment to keep the layers even and tight. The roof was not large, but it was steep and awkward, and more than once Darren found himself clinging to the ladder with his heart in his throat while Thraza calmly secured a bundle with one hand and held herself in place with the other. By afternoon, they had covered the worst of the leaks, the reeds forming a thick golden blanket that gleamed in the sunlight. It was rough work, not the neat precision his father would have demanded, but it was solid, and when Darren poured a bucket of water over it to test, the water ran off in clean streams, no drips coming through the ceiling below. "It works," he said, unable to keep the amazement out of his voice. "Of course it works." Thraza grinned at him, her tusks catching the light, and for a moment she looked so young, so unguarded that his breath caught. "Did you doubt me?" "Never." They finished the rest of the roof the next day, working until sunset, until every gap was covered and the house was sealed against the weather. When they climbed down for the last time, muscles trembling with exhaustion, Darren looked up at what they had built and felt something shift inside him. This was not just maintenance anymore, not just holding back the tide of decay. This was improvement, progress, building something that would last. "We did it," he said, and heard the wonder in his own voice. "We did." Thraza wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across her green skin. "Your house is safe now, for a while at least. Thanks to you," she shook her head. "Thanks to both of us. You are not as helpless as you think you are, Darren Ashford." They celebrated with a proper meal, or as proper as Darren could manage with his limited supplies. He killed one of his chickens, the oldest one that had stopped laying, and roasted it with wild onions and herbs from the garden. There was bread, fresh baked that morning, and the last of his summer apples, and even a small jug of beer he had been saving for a special occasion. They ate on the porch as the stars came out, and the air was full of the smell of cooling earth and distant wood smoke. Thraza ate slowly this time, savoring each bite, and when she finished she leaned back with a satisfied sigh. This is the best meal I have had in years, maybe ever. It is just roast chicken. It is more than that. It is a meal shared with a friend in a place that feels safe. That is worth more than gold. The word friend hung in the air between them, and Darren felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. Is that what we are? Friends? Thraza looked at him, and the firelight reflected in her golden eyes made them seem to glow. I do not know what else to call it. I have never had a human friend before. I have never had an orc friend before. Then we are both learning something new. She smiled, and it was not bitter this time, not guarded, just genuine pleasure, simple and unadorned. I like it. I like this. Being here, working beside you, not having to look over my shoulder every moment. It is strange, but good. How long can you stay? The question came out before he could think better of it, and he saw her smile falter. I do not know. Not forever. Sooner or later someone will see me, or word will spread, or something will happen. It always does. But not today. No, she agreed. Not today. They sat together as the night deepened, talking about small things and large things and everything in between. At some point, Darren realized he was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time since his father died. Maybe for the first time in years. And looking at Thraza, at the way the starlight caught in her dark hair, at the easy strength in the way she held herself, he realized something else too. Something that should have terrified him but somehow did not. He was falling for her. The thought should have sent him running for the hills, should have made him see the danger in what was happening. But instead it just felt inevitable, like water finding its level, like a seed growing toward the sun. He did not say anything, not yet. It was too soon, too fragile. But he tucked the realization away, held it close, and let himself simply enjoy this moment, this night, this impossible friendship that was already becoming something more. Autumn settled over the valley in earnest, the days growing shorter and the nights sharp with frost. Thraza stayed, though neither of them spoke about it directly. She simply woke each morning and found work that needed doing, and Darren found reasons for her to stay one more day, one more week. They fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Wake, work, eat, talk, sleep. The farm began to respond to the attention, the constant labor. The fence held strong. The roof kept out the rain. The garden plot got turned and manured, ready for spring planting. Darren went to the village once to buy supplies, trading eggs and a lamb for flour and salt and other necessities. The shopkeeper, a thin woman with suspicious eyes, asked after his health, whether he was managing alone, whether he needed help. He lied easily, said he was fine, that he had everything under control. She did not look convinced, but she took his trade and he left quickly, his heart hammering the whole ride home, terrified that someone would follow him, that someone would see Thraza and everything would come crashing down. But no one came. The valley remained quiet, isolated, their own small world. They worked on the barn next, shoring up the walls and replacing broken boards. Thraza proved to be as skilled with carpentry as she was with everything else, her hands sure and steady as she measured and cut and fitted pieces together. Darren found himself watching her more than he should, admiring the way her muscles moved under her green skin, the fierce concentration on her face when she was focused on a task, the little satisfied smile she got when something fit perfectly. She caught him looking once and raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing, just thinking. About, He almost said it then, almost confessed what he was feeling, but cowardice won out. About how lucky I am that you walked into my barn that night. Her expression softened. I am the lucky one. You gave me something I have not had in a long time. A place to rest, someone to talk to, a reason to stay in one place. You can stay as long as you want. Can I? She set down her hammer and turned to face him fully. What happens when winter comes, Darren, when the snow falls and it becomes harder to hide? When I am trapped here and you are trapped with me. Then we are trapped together. I can think of worse fates. You do not understand what you are saying. If anyone finds out, if anyone suspects, they will not just drive me away. They will punish you too, for harboring me, for helping me. They might even kill you. Let them try. He was surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. This is my land, my home. I choose who is welcome here. And you are welcome, Thraza. You are more than welcome. She looked at him for a long moment, something fierce and fragile warring in her expression. Then she closed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled him into a hug that lifted him off his feet. He felt the solid strength of her, the warmth of her body through the thin fabric of her shirt, smelled the scent of her, like wood smoke and earth and green growing things. His arms came up automatically, wrapping around her broad shoulders, and for a moment they just stood there, holding each other in the dusty barn light. When she set him down, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you. You do not know what that means to me. I think I do, Darren said quietly. Something changed between them after that. The easy companionship they had built gained a new dimension, a charge in the air whenever they were close. He found himself inventing excuses to brush against her, to touch her hand when passing tools, to stand near enough that their shoulders touched. She did the same, he noticed, her fingers lingering when she handed him something, her body angling toward his when they talked. Neither of them acknowledged it, but it was there, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Thraza asked him about his dreams, the ones he had mentioned weeks ago about leaving the farm. I wanted to see the ocean, he said. My mother told me stories about it when I was young, about waves as tall as houses and water that stretched to the edge of the world. She had seen it once, before she married my father, and she said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever witnessed. I always thought someday I would go see it for myself. Why didn't you? My father needed me. The farm needed me. And then he died and I was trapped. You are not trapped, Thraza said firmly. You could still go. You could sell this place or just walk away and go find your ocean. And leave you here. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Thraza went very still. I am not your responsibility, Darren, I know, but you are my friend, more than my friend. He took a breath, gathering courage. Thraza, I care about you, more than I should, probably. More than is wise. But I do. And the thought of leaving, of not seeing you every day, of not having you here, it makes my chest ache. She was quiet for so long that he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then she said, very softly, I care about you too. More than I have cared about anyone in a long time, maybe ever. Then stay, not just for the winter, stay. You do not know what you are asking. I know exactly what I am asking. He reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Her hand was so much larger than his, her skin rough with calluses, but it felt right, like 2 pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. I am asking you to build a life with me, here on this farm, to make it ours, not just mine, to face whatever comes together. People will hate you for it. For me, I do not care about people, I care about you. Tears were running down her face now, carving tracks through the dust on her cheeks. I am scared, Darren. I am so scared. Every time I let myself hope, let myself believe in something good, it gets taken away. I do not know if I can survive that again. Then do not hope. Just stay. Just be here with me and we will figure out the rest as it comes." She pulled her hand from his and stood abruptly, pacing to the door and back, agitation in every line of her body. "You do not understand what you would be giving up. A normal life, a human wife, children who look like you, safety, acceptance. All of it gone because of me." "I never wanted a normal life," Darren said, standing to face her. "And I never wanted a wife I did not love. As for children, well, I do not know if that is even possible between us. But if it is not, there are always children who need homes. Orphans, strays like you and me." He took a step toward her, then another, until they were almost touching. "I want you, Thraza, not some imaginary normal life. You." "Why?" The word came out as almost a sob. "Why me? I am an orc. I am everything you were taught to fear and hate. What could you possibly see in me? I see someone strong and brave and kind. I see someone who works until her hands bleed and never complains. I see someone who sings when she thinks no one is listening and jumps at spiders and eats like food is a religious experience. I see someone who deserves to be happy, who deserves a home and safety and someone who cares about her." He reached up, cupping her face in his hands, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight ridge of bone beneath. "I see the person I have been waiting for my whole life without knowing it." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then she was kissing him, or he was kissing her, or they were kissing each other. He was not sure which. Her tusks were awkward at first, but they figured it out, angling their heads, learning the shape of each other's mouths. She tasted like the apples they had eaten with dinner, sweet and tart, and her lips were softer than he expected, gentle despite her strength. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "This is madness. Probably. We could both die for this. Or worse. I know. I am still scared. So am I." He kissed her again, soft and brief. "But I am more scared of letting you go, of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." She closed her eyes, and he felt the shudder run through her, resistance finally crumbling. All right, I will stay. I will build a life with you, and when it all falls apart, when the world comes for us, we will face it together." "Together," he agreed. They held each other as the fire burned down, and outside the night was cold and clear, the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, lonely and defiant. But inside the little farmhouse, two people who should have been enemies stood wrapped in each other's arms, and for that moment at least, the world and its hatreds felt very far away. Winter came on fast after that, the first snow falling in thick white curtains that blanketed the valley and turned the world silent. Darren and Thraza weathered it together, keeping the fire high, the animals fed, the paths clear. They slept in the same bed now, her warmth keeping him from freezing on the coldest nights, his body curled against hers like they had been made to fit together. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other in the way people do when they have all the time in the world and nowhere else to be. He taught her to read, painstakingly working through his father's small collection of books, watching her face light up as words became stories, became ideas. She taught him to fight, not with a sword but with his hands, showing him orc wrestling holds that used leverage instead of strength, that could turn an opponent's power against them. They made love, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as they learned what pleased each other. She was gentle with him despite her strength, always aware of how easily she could hurt him. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, learning the sensitive places, the spots that made her gasp and arch against him. In those long winter nights, wrapped together under piles of quilts, he felt happier than he had ever been. The farm was still a struggle, still required constant work and worry, but it was different now, bearable, because he was not facing it alone. They talked about the future sometimes in careful hypotheticals. What they would plant in spring, what animals they might acquire, how they would improve the house and barn. They did not talk about the bigger questions, about what would happen when someone inevitably discovered Thraza's presence, about how long they could maintain this isolation. Those conversations felt too dangerous, too likely to shatter the fragile happiness they had built. So they focused on the moment, on each day as it came, and let the future worry about itself. In late winter, a traveler came to the door, a peddler with a cart full of goods seeking shelter from a storm. Darren opened the door to find an old man, hunched and frost-bitten, barely able to stand. "Please," the peddler said through chattering teeth. "Just for the night. I have coin I can pay." Darren hesitated, acutely aware of Thraza hidden in the bedroom, holding her breath. But the man was dying, anyone could see that, and turning him away would be murder as sure as using a knife. "Come in," he said, and helped the old man to the fire. He got the peddler warmed up and fed, listening to his rambling stories about the road, about the villages he had passed through, about the worsening weather. All the while, his mind was racing, trying to figure out how to keep Thraza hidden, how to get through the night without the old man discovering his secret. But at some point, the peddler's eyes went to the bedroom door and he said, "You have someone else here. I heard footsteps." Darren's heart stopped. "No, you must have heard me. The house makes strange noises sometimes. I may be old, but I am not deaf." The peddler's eyes were shrewd now, curious. "Who is it, your wife?" "Yes, my wife. She is shy around strangers. I mean no harm. Just wanted to thank her for the hospitality, if she is willing to come out." Darren felt trapped. If he refused, the peddler would be suspicious. If he agreed, Thraza would be seen and everything would unravel. He opened his mouth, not sure what he was going to say, when the bedroom door opened and Thraza stepped out. She had wrapped herself in one of his mother's old shawls, covering her head and shoulders, but her green skin was visible, her tusks, her pointed ears. There was no hiding what she was. The peddler stared, his mouth falling open. For a long moment no one moved, no one breathed. Then the old man said, "Bless me. An orc woman. I have not seen one up close in 20 years. "I will go," Thraza said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear Darren could see in her eyes. "I will leave now and you can forget you saw me. Leave in this storm. You will freeze to death before you make it a mile." The peddler shook his head. "Besides, I am not going to tell anyone. Why would I? You gave me food and shelter when I needed it. The fact that you happen to be green is your business, not mine." Darren felt like the ground had shifted under his feet. "You are not going to report us. To who?" "The nearest magistrate is 3 days' ride from here, and I am not about to go back out in that weather just to cause trouble for good people." The peddler smiled, a gap-toothed thing but genuine. "Live and let live. That is my philosophy. I have seen enough of the world to know that kindness matters more than skin color." Thraza moved to stand beside Darren, and he felt her hand slip into his, holding tight. "Thank you," she said. "You do not know what this means to us." "I think I do." The peddler's eyes were kind. "The world is changing, slowly but surely. More orcs and humans trading now, even a few mixed settlements on the far frontier. It will be generations before the old hatreds die, but they are dying. You too, you are just ahead of your time." They talked late into the night, the peddler sharing news from the wider world, stories that Darren and Thraza had no way of knowing, isolated as they were. There were rumors of peace talks between human kingdoms and orc clans, of trade routes opening up, of cautious alliances being formed against common enemies. It was not much, not yet, but it was something. When the peddler left the next morning, the storm having blown itself out, he pressed a small bag into Darren's hand. "Seeds," he said. "New varieties from the southern lands. Plant them in spring, see what grows. Consider it payment for your hospitality." After he was gone, Darren and Thraza stood in the doorway, watching him disappear down the snowy road. And for the first time, Darren allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were not as alone as they thought. Spring came in a rush of green and mud and birdsong, the snow melting away to reveal the world beneath. Darren and Thraza planted the seeds the peddler had given them, along with the more traditional crops Darren had planned. Wheat and barley, beans and turnips, a small plot of vegetables for their own use. Thraza was tireless, her strength allowing them to break twice as much ground as Darren could have managed alone. The sheep dropped lambs, 5 of them, all healthy and strong. The chickens began laying again with renewed enthusiasm. The whole farm seemed to wake up, responding to the attention and care that had been missing for so long. One morning in early spring, as they were working in the garden, Thraza suddenly went still, her head cocked to one side, listening. "What is it?" Darren asked. "Someone is coming." Multiple someones, horses. Fear spiked through him. "Hide, go to the barn, hide in the loft." "No." Her jaw was set, determined. "If they are here for me, hiding will only make things worse. We face this together." Remember, she was right, but that did not make the fear any less. They stood together in the yard, waiting, as the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Then 3 horses came around the bend, carrying men in the rough clothing of farmers, and at their head was Old Man Garrett, Darren's nearest neighbor. Garrett pulled up short when he saw Thraza, his eyes going wide. So the rumors were true. "Ashford, what in the name of all that is holy are you thinking?" "I am thinking that this is my land and who I welcome here is my business." Darren was proud that his voice came out steady, even though his heart was racing. "Your business becomes everyone's business when you are harboring an orc." One of the other men had his hand on his sword hilt, his face red with anger. "These creatures are monsters, killers. She could murder you in your sleep." "She has been here since autumn," Darren said flatly. "If she wanted to murder me, I would be dead already. Instead, she has helped me repair my farm, plant my fields, survive the winter. She has been a better neighbor and friend than any of you." "It is not natural," Garrett said, but there was less anger in his voice now, more uncertainty. "Orcs and humans, we do not mix. It is against the way of things. The way of things is changing." Thraza spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clear. "I am not your enemy. I do not raid your farms or threaten your families. I only want to live in peace, to work honest labor, to build a life." "Is that so wrong?" The men looked at each other, clearly unsure now. The one with his hand on his sword still looked angry, but the others seemed more confused than hostile. Finally, Garrett sighed. "Look, Ashford, I do not care what you do on your own property, but people in the village are talking. They hear you have an orc here, they start imagining war parties and midnight raids and who knows what else. Calm those fears, make them understand she is not a threat, and we will leave you be. But if anything happens, if anyone gets hurt or property gets damaged, it will be on your head. Understood? Understood." Relief flooded through Darren, making his knees weak. "Thank you, Garrett. Do not thank me yet. You are playing a dangerous game, boy. I hope you know what you are doing." The men rode away, and Darren and Thraza stood in the yard, holding each other, shaking with adrenaline and relief. "They could have killed me," Thraza said, her voice unsteady. "Could have killed both of us. But they did not. And they will not, as long as we keep our heads down and give them no reason to fear us. Is that how we have to live? In fear, always looking over our shoulders? For now, maybe, But it will get better. It has to get better. She pulled back to look at him, her golden eyes searching his face. You really believe that, do not you, that the world can change? I have to believe it, because the alternative is giving up, and I am not ready to do that. Are you? No, she said firmly. No, I am not. They went back to work, but something had shifted. The confrontation had made real what they had been avoiding thinking about. Their situation was precarious, dependent on the tolerance of people who had every reason to hate them. But it had also proven that tolerance was possible, that not everyone would react with immediate violence. It was a fragile hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Summer came in hot and bright, the crops growing tall in the fields. Darren and Thraza worked from dawn to dusk, tending to the farm, the animals, the endless tasks that came with trying to coax a living from the land. It was hard work, exhausting work, but it was also satisfying in a way that Darren had never experienced before. Because he was not doing it alone, because he had someone to share the burdens and the victories with. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set, too tired to do much more than hold hands and talk in low voices about the day, about their plans, about nothing in particular. Those were the moments Darren treasured most, the quiet intimacy of simply being together. No pretense, no performance, just two people who had found each other against all odds and were determined to make it work. One night, as the fireflies danced in the garden and the air was thick with the smell of honeysuckle, Darren took Thraza's hand and said, "Marry me." She looked at him, startled. "What? Marry me?" "I know we cannot do it in a church. I know no priest would agree to it, but we could do it ourselves. Make our own vows, our own promises. Make it official, at least between us." "Why? We are already together. What difference does a ceremony make?" "Because I want to stand before whatever gods there are and declare that you are mine and I am yours. Because I want there to be no question, no doubt. Because I love you, Thraza, and I want the world to know it, even if the world hates me for it." She was quiet for a long time, and he could see the emotions warring across her face, hope and fear and longing and doubt. Finally, she said, "In my culture, when two people wish to bind their lives together, they build something. A house, a shelter, a fence, something that will endure and stand as a symbol of their commitment. We have already done that. We built your fence, we repaired your roof. In the eyes of my people, we are already married. Then, in the eyes of your people and mine, let us be married." Darren pulled her to her feet, holding both her hands in his. "I, Darren Ashford, take you, Thraza, to be my partner and my wife. I promise to stand by you in good times and bad, to work beside you and fight beside you and love you until my last breath. I promise to build a life with you that is worth keeping, no matter what the world thinks of it." Her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling, that rare, unguarded smile that made his heart ache. "I, Thraza, take you, Darren Ashford, to be my partner and my husband. I promise to protect you and provide for you and love you with everything I am. I promise to build a future with you, to make this farm not just yours but ours. I promise that when the world comes for us, I will stand between you and harm, and I will not fall easily." They kissed then, long and deep, sealing their vows with their bodies the way they had with their words. And when they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Darren felt like something fundamental had shifted, like the world had rearranged itself into a new and better shape. "So we are married now," Thraza said, wonderment in her voice. "Just like that, just like that. It seems too easy." "Nothing about this has been easy, but yes, the ceremony was simple. That does not make it any less real." She pulled him close again, resting her chin on top of his head. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a husband, a future. I thought I would die alone, still running, still searching for something I could never find. But here I am, married to a human farmer in the middle of nowhere. It is absurd. It is perfect, Darren corrected. That too. They stood together under the stars, husband and wife by their own declaration, and let the night settle around them like a blessing. Autumn came again. A full year since Thraza had stumbled into Darren's barn seeking shelter from a storm. They celebrated the anniversary by taking a day off from work, a luxury they rarely allowed themselves, and walking the property line together, surveying everything they had built and rebuilt and improved. The fence stood strong, every post solid, the wire taut and rust-free. The roof no longer leaked, the thatch thick and weatherproof. The barn was in better condition than it had been in decades, the walls square and true. The fields were heavy with ripe grain, the garden overflowing with vegetables. The sheep had multiplied to 18, the chickens to a full dozen. The farm was not just surviving anymore, it was thriving. Look at all of this, Thraza said, gesturing at the land spread out before them. A year ago you were alone and struggling and everything was falling apart. Now look. Now I have you, Darren said simply. That made all the difference. We made the difference, together. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I keep waiting for it to go wrong, for something to shatter this happiness. But it just keeps going day after day, and I am starting to think maybe it is real. Maybe this is actually my life now. It is real. And it is your life, our life. No one can take that from us unless we let them. They walked back to the house as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire. Darren felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful, a sense of rightness that he had never experienced before. This farm, this woman, this life they had built together, it was everything he had never known he needed. That night, as they lay in bed, Thraza said, "I am pregnant." For a moment, Darren's mind simply stopped working, unable to process the words. Then understanding crashed over him like a wave. What? How? I thought. I mean, we are different species. I did not think it was possible. Neither did I. But my body has been changing and I know the signs. I am carrying your child, Darren, our child. He sat up, staring at her in the darkness, trying to see her face. Are you sure? I am sure. But what will it be like? Half human, half orc. Will it be healthy? Will it survive? I do not know. There was fear in her voice now, real fear. I have never heard of such a thing happening. I do not know what to expect, what to prepare for. But it is happening, whether we are ready or not. Darren lay back down and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Then we will figure it out together, the same way we have figured out everything else. We will protect this child and love this child and give it the best life we can. That is all we can do. What if people find out? What if they see the child and realize what it is? They will call it an abomination, a monster. Then we will fight them. Or we will leave, go somewhere no one knows us, start over. I do not care what we have to do, Thraza. This child is ours, and I will not let anyone harm it. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face, and he held her and let her cry, understanding that this was terror and joy and hope all tangled together. Too much emotion for words. When she finally calmed, she said, I am scared, Darren. I am so scared, but I am also happy, happier than I have any right to be. You have every right, he told her fiercely. You have earned this happiness, earned this family. Do not let fear steal it from you. I will try. They lay together in the darkness, and Darren's mind was already racing ahead, planning. They would need to prepare to get supplies, to find someone who could help with the birth. It would not be easy, might even be dangerous, but they would manage. They always managed. Winter came again, and with it the waiting. Thraza's belly swelled as the child grew, and despite her fears, she seemed healthy, strong. Darren fussed over her, trying to get her to rest, to take it easy. But she ignored him for the most part, continuing to work until her body simply would not allow it anymore. In the depth of winter, when the snow was piled high and the world was silent and still, Thraza went into labor. Darren had prepared as best he could, boiling water, laying out clean cloths, saying every prayer he could remember from his childhood. But when it began, when Thraza's face went tight with pain and her breathing turned sharp and shallow, he felt utterly helpless. "You have to be strong," she gasped between contractions. "You have to help me through this. I do not know what to do, neither do I, but we will figure it out." The labor was long and hard, stretching through the night and into the morning. Darren stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her face, whispering encouragement even when he was sure they were both going to die. She was so strong, enduring pain that would have killed him, refusing to give up even when exhaustion made her weep. And then, as the sun was rising, painting the snow outside in shades of pink and gold, the child came into the world with a thin, wailing cry. Darren cut the cord with shaking hands and wrapped the baby in a clean blanket, staring down at the tiny creature with wonder and terror. It was small, so small, with delicate features and skin that was a pale green, lighter than Thraza's but darker than human. Its ears were slightly pointed, its eyes, when they opened, a dark gold. No tusks, at least not yet, though Darren did not know if they would develop later. "Let me see," Thraza said weakly, and he placed the child in her arms. She looked down at the baby and her face transformed, all the pain and fear melting away into pure love. "A girl," she whispered. "We have a daughter." "She is beautiful," Darren said, and meant it. The child was strange, yes, a blending of two peoples who were supposed to be enemies. But she was also perfect, miraculous, the physical embodiment of everything he and Thraza had built together. "What should we name her?" Thraza asked. Darren thought of his mother, who had told him stories of the ocean, who had seen beauty in the world and tried to share it with him before the fever took her. "Tessa," he said. "We should name her Tessa Ashford." "Tessa," Thraza repeated, testing the name. Then she smiled, that full, unguarded smile that he loved. "Yes, Tessa. It is perfect." They spent the rest of the day wrapped together, the three of them, a family forged from impossibility. Tessa slept and cried and nursed at Thraza's breast, and Darren watched them both with a feeling too big for words. He had been so alone a year ago, drowning in debt and despair, watching his father's legacy crumble around him. And now he had a wife, a child, a future that stretched bright and unwritten before him. The roof no longer leaked. The fence was standing strong, and together they had built something worth keeping. Spring came yet again, and with it new challenges. Tessa was growing fast, her green skin darkening slightly, her eyes bright and curious as she watched the world. Darren and Thraza took turns carrying her while they worked, fashioning a sling from old cloth that kept her close and safe. People in the village had stopped asking about the orc at the Ashford farm, either accepting her presence or deciding it was not worth the trouble to object. A few neighbors even began trading with them, exchanging goods and pleasantries, though no one ventured close enough to see Tessa clearly. One afternoon in late spring, as Darren was working in the garden, he looked up to see a group of figures approaching down the road. His heart seized with fear until he recognized the lead figure, the old peddler who had stayed with them 2 winters ago. "Well met, Ashford." The peddler called out cheerfully. "I was passing through and thought I would stop by, see how you and your wife were faring." Behind him were 3 other people, 2 humans and an orc, all younger, all looking around the farm with open curiosity. "These are my companions," the peddler explained as Thraza emerged from the house, Tessa on her hip. We are traveling together, seeing the frontier, spreading news of the peace talks. Progress is slow, but it is happening. The orc in the group, a male with gray-green skin and intelligent eyes, stepped forward and bowed formally to Thraza. "It is an honor to meet you, sister. There are not many of us who dare to live openly among humans. Your courage is an inspiration." Thraza looked startled, then pleased. "I did not think I would ever be called courageous for simply trying to survive." "Survival is its own form of courage," the orc replied, "especially when the world makes it so hard." They invited the travelers in for a meal, and the conversation stretched long into the evening. The visitors shared news from the wider world, trade agreements being signed, mixed settlements being established on the far frontiers, even a few marriages between orcs and humans being grudgingly recognized by local authorities. It was slow progress, generational progress, but it was real. And they shared stories of others like Darren and Thraza, people who had chosen love over prejudice, family over fear. It turned out they were not as alone as they had thought. There were others out there, fighting the same battles, building the same impossible futures. When the travelers left the next morning, the peddler pressed another bag into Darren's hand. More seeds, and something else. He pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. A map. It shows the places where mixed families are living, the communities that have sprung up. If you ever need help or just want to meet others like yourselves, these are the places to go. Darren took the map with shaking hands. "Thank you. You do not know what this means." "I think I do." The peddler looked at Tessa, who was watching him with wide golden eyes from Thraza's arms. "That child right there, she is the future. A living bridge between two peoples. Love her, protect her, teach her to be proud of what she is. And maybe, just maybe, by the time she is grown, the world will have changed enough that she will not have to hide." After they left, Darren and Thraza studied the map together, seeing the scattered points of light across the frontier, each one representing a family like theirs, people brave or foolish enough to believe that love could conquer hate. "We are not alone," Thraza said wonderingly. "There are others." "So many others." "We were never alone," Darren told her. "We just did not know it yet." The years passed, measured in seasons and harvests and the gradual growth of their daughter. Tessa learned to walk, then to run, her laughter ringing across the farm as she chased chickens and climbed haystacks. She was a curious child, bright and bold, asking endless questions about everything she saw. Darren and Thraza taught her together, blending human and orc traditions, telling her stories from both cultures. They taught her to read and write, to work the land, to handle animals, to defend herself if need be. And they taught her the most important lesson, that she was loved completely and unconditionally, exactly as she was. Sometimes neighbors would visit now, more frequently as the years went on. The initial shock and fear had faded, replaced by cautious acceptance, and eventually something approaching friendship. Old man Garrett became a regular visitor, claiming he just wanted to check on the fence line but really coming to play with Tessa, who called him Grandpa Garrett and climbed on him like he was a piece of furniture. The farm prospered. Darren and Thraza expanded the house, adding a second bedroom for Tessa and a proper workshop for the endless projects that came with maintaining a homestead. They acquired more sheep, a milk cow, even a pair of pigs that Thraza claimed would be more trouble than they were worth, but that Tessa loved instantly. And through it all, the fence stood strong, the roof kept out the rain, and the home they had built together endured. One evening, when Tessa was 5 years old, she asked the question they had been expecting but still dreading. "Mama, why do I look different from the other children in the village?" Thraza and Darren exchanged glances. They had talked about this moment, prepared for it, but it was still hard. You look different because you are special, Thraza said, pulling Tessa onto her lap. Your papa is human and I am an orc, and you are both. You are the best of both of us, all mixed together into one amazing person. But the other children say orcs are monsters, that they are bad. Some orcs are bad, Darren said carefully. Just like some humans are bad, but most orcs are just people trying to live their lives same as anyone else. Your mama is an orc and she is the bravest, kindest person I know. Does she seem like a monster to you? Tessa shook her head firmly. Mama is not a monster. Mama is mama. Exactly, and you are not a monster either. You are our daughter and you are perfect just the way you are. But what if people are mean to me because of what I am? Then we will deal with it together, Thraza said fiercely. And we will teach you to be strong enough to face anyone who tries to hurt you. But you should never be ashamed of what you are, Tessa. You are a gift, a bridge between two worlds. Never forget that. Tessa seemed satisfied with this answer, though Darren suspected more questions would come as she grew older and understood more of the world's complexities. But for now, she was content, secure in the love of her parents and the safety of her home. That night after Tessa was asleep, Darren and Thraza sat on the porch as they always did, watching the stars wheel overhead. The air was warm, full of the sounds of summer, crickets and frogs and the distant hoot of an owl. You ever regret it? Darren asked. Staying here, binding your life to mine, all of it. Thraza looked at him like he had grown a second head. Regret it? Darren, you gave me everything. A home, a family, a reason to keep living. Why would I ever regret that? Because it has been hard. Because people still look at us strangely, still whisper behind their hands. Because Tessa will face challenges that neither of us can completely shield her from. Life is always hard, Thraza said simply. And people will always find reasons to judge and fear what they do not understand. But we have each other, we have our daughter, we have this farm that we built with our own hands. That is worth any amount of hardship. You are sure, I am sure. She took his hand, bringing it to her lips. When I stumbled into your barn that night, I was ready to die. I had nothing left, no hope, no future, and you gave me all of it back. You looked at me and saw a person, not a monster. You offered me kindness when the world had offered me nothing but cruelty. How could I ever regret that? How could I regret any of this? Darren felt his throat tighten with emotion. I love you. I do not say it enough, but I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, more than words can say. They sat together in the warm darkness, hands clasped, and Darren thought about that first night, about the storm and the leaking roof and the broken fence. About the moment he had chosen kindness over fear, chosen to help rather than drive away. That single decision had changed everything, had set them both on a path that led to this moment, this life, this profound and complicated happiness. The roof had leaked. The fence had been down. Everything had been falling apart. But together, they had built something worth keeping. Something that would endure long after they were gone. A legacy not of stone or wealth, but of love and courage and the belief that the world could be better than it was. And that, Darren thought, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Tessa grew into a strong, confident young woman, beloved by the community that had once viewed her existence with suspicion. The farm continued to thrive under Darren and Thraza's joint stewardship, becoming known throughout the region for its quality sheep and grain. Other mixed families began to settle in the valley, drawn by the example Darren and Thraza had set, creating a small but vibrant community where humans and orcs lived and worked side by side. Darren's hair grayed, his back grew stiff with age, but his heart remained full. Thraza aged more slowly, as orcs did, and he knew that she would likely outlive him by decades. They did not talk about it much, the future grief that awaited her, but sometimes he would catch her watching him with a sadness in her eyes that spoke of that knowledge. "Promise me something," he said one night, when they were both old and the farm was being managed more by Tessa and her friends than by them. "Promise me that when I am gone, you will not shut yourself away. You will keep living, keep building, keep loving. Do not let my death be the end of your story." "How can I promise that?" Thraza's voice was thick with tears. "You are my world, Darren. When you are gone, what will be left? Everything will be left. Our daughter, our grandchildren, this farm, this community. All of it, waiting for you to continue the work we started. Promise me you will not give up." She was quiet for a long time, and he could feel the tension in her body, the war between wanting to promise and fearing that she could not keep such a promise. Finally, she said, "I promise I will try. That is all I can give you. Then that is enough." He died in his sleep 5 years later, peacefully, with Thraza's hand in his and Tessa sitting vigil by his bedside. His last thought was of that first night, of the storm and the barn and the frightened orc woman seeking shelter. He had been so lost then, so alone, drowning in grief and debt, and the weight of trying to hold his father's legacy together. But he had made one good choice, one moment of kindness in the darkness, and it had led to a life richer and fuller than he ever could have imagined. The roof had leaked. The fence had been down. Everything had been falling apart, but they had built something worth keeping, something that would endure, and that was the best ending he could have hoped for. Thraza stood at Darren's grave, carved into the hillside overlooking the farm, and felt the weight of her grief settle over her like a mantle. But she had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. So she went back to work, tending the farm, caring for her daughter and grandchildren, helping new families settle in the valley. She became the grandmother of the community, the wise elder who had lived through the hard times and could guide others through their own struggles. And every night, she would sit on the porch of the house they had built together, looking out over the land they had tended, and remember his kindness, his courage, his unwavering belief that love was stronger than hate. Remember the way he had looked at her that first night with curiosity instead of fear. Remember the life they had built, piece by piece, nail by nail, seed by seed. The roof no longer leaked. The fence stood strong, and the legacy they had created together would endure for generations. Because some things, once built with love and care and stubborn determination, can never truly be torn down. They become eternal, woven into the fabric of the world itself, a testament to what is possible when two people choose each other against all odds and refuse to let go. That was what Darren and Thraza had built. Not just a farm, not just a family, but a new way of being in the world. And it was worth keeping, worth fighting for, worth remembering, always.